Lieutenant Jake Morrison had seen enough emergency beacons in his 5 years aboard the Aurora to know when something felt wrong. This particular signal pulsed with an irregular rhythm that made his maintenance scanner hiccup every third sweep, and the coordinates placed it smack in the middle of the Kepler drift, a region of space where gravitational anomalies had a habit of turning perfectly good starships into very expensive scrap metal. "Control, this is Morrison in Shuttle Bay 7. He spoke into his comm as he ran final diagnostics on the repair skiff. "I'm picking up some seriously weird readings on that distress beacon. Are we sure it's not just cosmic background radiation having an identity crisis?" The response crackled through static. "Morrison, you're cleared for investigation. Standard protocols apply, and try not to get creative with the paperwork this time." Jake grinned as he sealed his helmet. Last month's incident report, which had described a plasma conduit failure as aggressively interpretive modern art, had apparently made the rounds. "Copy that, Control. Maintaining my legendary professionalism as always." The skiff detached from the Aurora with its usual mechanical wheeze, and Jake guided it through the asteroid field that served as the drift's unofficial welcome committee. His scanners painted a three-dimensional map of tumbling rock and ice, each fragment tagged with velocity vectors that looked like a mathematician's fever dream. But there, nestled in the shadow of an asteroid the size of Manhattan, something that definitely didn't belong. The craft was sleek where human ships were angular, organic where they were mechanical. Its hull seemed to flow like liquid mercury frozen in motion, and it pulsed with a soft blue-white light that made Jake's instruments register energy readings that should have been impossible. Crystalline formations sprouted from its surface like frozen lightning, each one humming with power that made his teeth ache. "Well," Jake muttered, bringing his skiff closer, "either I've found the galaxy's most expensive piece of abstract sculpture, or today just got significantly more interesting." His docking protocols were useless. The alien ship had no visible airlocks, no standard coupling mechanisms, nothing that corresponded to human engineering. But as his skiff approached, a section of the hull simply dissolved away, revealing an interior that glowed with the same ethereal light as the crystals outside. Jake had always prided himself on being practical about the impossible, but stepping into an alien ship still felt like crossing a threshold he couldn't uncross. The interior defied every assumption he'd ever made about spacecraft design. Walls curved without corners, surfaces shifted between transparency and opacity as he moved past them, and the whole space hummed with an energy that felt almost alive. He found her in what might have been a command center, if command centers were designed by architects who understood that straight lines were merely suggestions. She lay on what appeared to be a crystalline platform, unconscious, her long dark hair spread around her head like spilled ink. She looked human completely, perfectly human except for the ears. They were elongated, tapering to delicate points that emerged from her hair like secrets waiting to be discovered. Jake's scanner detected human normal vital signs, though the energy readings around her made his instruments throw up error messages in 3 different languages. He knelt beside the platform, his training kicking in automatically. "Standard first aid protocol it is," he murmured, reaching for his medical kit. "Though I'm pretty sure the manual doesn't cover mysterious alien princess in crystal spaceship." Her eyes opened as he was checking her pulse, deep violet eyes that seemed to hold flecks of starlight, and she regarded him with the kind of calm assessment that made him suddenly aware of how ridiculous he must look in his bulky maintenance suit. "You know," she said in perfectly unaccented English, her voice carrying a hint of amusement, "most species at least pretend to ask permission before attempting medical intervention on strangers." Jake nearly fell backward, catching himself against what might have been a control console. You were unconscious. Standard procedure is." "Standard procedure," she interrupted, sitting up with fluid grace, "is usually developed by species who haven't encountered others yet. You're human, aren't you? Last time I checked, Jake managed, his brain still processing the fact that she was speaking his language and apparently finding his rescue attempt mildly entertaining. Though right now, I'm starting to question a lot of basic assumptions about my day. She smiled, and it transformed her entire face from merely beautiful to something that made his chest do complicated things. Your day is about to become significantly more complicated, I'm afraid. I'm Zara, and I seem to be having some technical difficulties with my ship. Jake Morrison, maintenance engineer, and I specialize in technical difficulties, he replied, falling back on humor because his brain was still trying to catch up. Though I should probably mention that my experience with alien technology is pretty much limited to science fiction movies, and that one time I accidentally rewired the coffee machine to speak Mandarin. Your coffee machine speak? Zara asked, genuine curiosity coloring her voice. Only when I've been messing with them, Jake admitted. It took 3 days to convince it to switch back to English, and even now it occasionally throws in random Mandarin curse words when it's feeling dramatic. Zara laughed, a sound like silver bells with just a hint of something wild underneath, and Jake felt something shift in his chest. I think I'm going to like your species, Jake Morrison. Well, that's a relief, he said, standing and offering her a hand up. Because I was starting to worry that first contact was going to involve a lot more probing and a lot less friendly conversation. She took his hand, and the contact sent a small shock through his palm, not unpleasant but definitely not normal. What makes you think this is first contact? The question caught him off guard. Well, I mean, you're clearly not human, despite appearances, and I'm pretty sure your ship there is using technology that would make our best engineers weep with envy. So either this is first contact, or I missed a really important memo about interstellar neighbors. You did miss several important memos, Zara said, stepping down from the platform with movements that seemed to defy gravity in subtle ways. But that's hardly your fault. Your species has a talent for being charmingly oblivious to the larger universe. Charmingly oblivious, Jake repeated. I'm going to choose to take that as a compliment. It was intended as one. She moved to what looked like a control surface that existed more as light than solid matter, her hands dancing through holographic displays that shifted and flowed around her fingers. Though your timing is impeccable, I seem to have encountered what you might call diplomatic complications. Diplomatic complications, Jake echoed, watching her work with technology that made his maintenance scanner look like a stone axe. That sounds ominous. Should I be worried about, say, interstellar incidents, war fleets, really angry alien diplomats with death rays? Only moderately, Zara replied with the kind of casual tone people usually reserved for discussing weather. The death rays are more of a formality than an actual threat, usually. Usually, Jake repeated faintly. Right. Well, on the bright side, my day was getting pretty boring anyway. Zara glanced at him over her shoulder, and he caught another glimpse of that smile that seemed to carry starlight in its corners. I have a feeling, Jake Morrison, that boring is about to become a very foreign concept for you. As if to emphasize her point, her ship's crystalline formations suddenly flared with brilliant light, and Jake's comm unit exploded with chatter from the aurora. Through the alien ship's somehow transparent hull, he could see more lights appearing in the distance, ships, moving with the kind of purposeful coordination that suggested they weren't interested in friendly conversation. So, Jake said, his humor reflex kicking in hard, on a scale of 1 to, we're all going to die horribly. How diplomatic are these complications we're talking about? Zara's hands moved faster through the light displays, and the ship around them began to hum with increasing intensity. That depends entirely on whether you're willing to help a stranded traveler with some very unconventional repair needs. Jake looked at her, really looked at her for the first time since she'd opened those impossible violet eyes. There was something in her expression that spoke of authority, of power held in careful check, of decisions that carried weight across vast distances. And underneath it all, just a hint of vulnerability that she probably didn't let many people see. "You know what?" he said, making a decision that his superiors were probably going to have very strong opinions about. "My shift doesn't end for another 6 hours anyway, and I've always been curious about impossible technology. Lead the way." Getting Zara aboard the Asterisk Aurora required what Jake generously called creative interpretation of maintenance protocols. According to his hastily filed report, he was bringing aboard salvaged materials of unknown composition for analysis, which was technically accurate if you considered a sentient alien Empress to be salvageable material, which Jake absolutely did not recommend putting to a vote. "Your ship's corridors are remarkably inefficient," Zara observed as they made their way through the service tunnels Jake used to avoid the main thoroughfares. "Do humans have an aesthetic preference for right angles, or is this some form of psychological conditioning?" "It's called structural integrity," Jake replied, pausing at an intersection to check for foot traffic. "We're big fans of walls that don't collapse when someone sneezes. Revolutionary concept, I know." "Your sarcasm is noted and appreciated," Zara said, ducking slightly as they passed under a low-hanging conduit. "Though I should mention that your structurally sound corridors are leaking gravitational stability at 17 different points." Jake stopped walking. "They're what now?" "Nothing catastrophic," Zara assured him quickly. "Your ship won't implode or anything dramatic. It's more like having 17 small holes in a bucket. Eventually, you'll notice the water level dropping. And by water, you mean the fundamental forces that keep your atoms from deciding they'd rather be somewhere else." Jake blinked. "Right. Adding existential crisis about atomic cohesion to my list of things I didn't need to worry about this morning." They reached his quarter without encountering anyone who might ask awkward questions about his unusual guest. Jake's living space was regulation small and cluttered with the accumulated detritus of someone who fixed things for a living: spare parts, diagnostic tools, and at least 6 different types of adhesive tape that each served mysteriously specific purposes. "Home sweet home," Jake announced, keying the door lock. "It's not much, but it's got the galaxy's most temperamental coffee synthesizer, which I'm pretty sure violates several laws of physics on a regular basis." Zara examined the synthesizer with professional interest. "This device is fascinating. It appears to be creating matter from energy, but the quantum alignment is completely wrong. How does it function?" "Badly," Jake replied. "It's been producing coffee-adjacent beverages with increasing creativity ever since I tried to recalibrate its molecular matrix last month. Yesterday, it gave me something that tasted like liquid regret with hints of existential despair." "May I?" Zara asked, her hands already moving toward the machine's control interface. "Be my guest. At this point, I'm pretty sure it's gained sentience and is actively plotting against me anyway." Zara's fingers danced across the controls with the same fluid precision she'd shown on her own ship. The synthesizer, which usually wheezed and complained like an asthmatic robot, began to hum with smooth efficiency. Lights that Jake hadn't even known existed began to pulse in complex patterns along its housing. "There," Zara said with satisfaction. "I've optimized its quantum field generators and recalibrated the molecular assembly matrix. It should now produce beverages that actually resemble the chemical composition you're requesting." Jake pressed the button for his usual morning coffee. The synthesizer responded by producing a cup of liquid that glowed with a soft blue radiance and smelled like ozone mixed with vanilla. "Okay," Jake said, staring at the luminescent beverage. "So when you said optimized, did you mean optimized for human consumption or optimized for something else entirely?" "Try it," Zara encouraged. "I may have enhanced it slightly." Jake took a cautious sip and immediately felt his fatigue evaporate as warmth spread through his system. The coffee tasted like the best cup he'd ever had, with undertones of something that reminded him of starlight and possibilities. "This is incredible. What did you do to it?" "I taught your synthesizer to appreciate the quantum potential inherent in coffee beans," Zara replied matter-of-factly. "Each cup now contains the theoretical essence of every perfect cup of coffee that could exist across all possible timelines." Jake took another sip. "So I'm drinking multiverse coffee." "In the most technical sense, yes. I'm not sure whether that's the best thing that's ever happened to me, or something I should be deeply concerned about." "Both, probably," Zara admitted, "though the enhanced caffeine should help with the existential implications." Their conversation was interrupted by Jake's comm unit chirping, with an incoming message from Chief Engineer Rodriguez. Jake's heart skipped as he realized he'd completely forgotten about his scheduled report on the morning's maintenance rotation. "Morrison, where's that diagnostic report on the plasma manifolds?" Rodriguez's voice crackled through the speaker. "You were supposed to have it filed an hour ago." Jake looked at Zara, who was examining his toolkit with the kind of focused interest that suggested she was cataloging human technological limitations. Chief, I ran into some complications with the external inspection. Might need a few more hours to complete the analysis." "What kind of complications?" "The kind that requires really detailed examination," Jake replied, which was technically true if you considered detailed examination of alien technology to be within the scope of plasma manifold diagnostics. "Fine, but I need that report by end of shift. And Morrison, try not to break anything else while you're being thorough." The comm clicked off and Jake sagged with relief. Crisis temporarily averted. "Though I'm going to need to actually check those plasma manifolds at some point before Rodriguez realizes I've been creatively reinterpreting my duties." "Your plasma manifolds are functioning at 67% efficiency," Zara observed, not looking up from the microscanner she was examining. "Your containment fields are stable." The Aurora's main reactor decided to have what Jake's grandmother would have called a moment at precisely 14:30 ship time, which was exactly when Jake was beginning to think his day might actually settle into something resembling normal routine. The emergency klaxons started wailing with their usual dramatic flair, and Jake's comm unit immediately began shrieking updates about containment field fluctuations and imminent catastrophic failure. "Well," Jake said to Zara, who was still examining his collection of diagnostic tools with the fascination of an archaeologist discovering a particularly interesting pottery shard, "looks like the universe has decided I'm having too peaceful an afternoon." The ship shuddered around them, lights flickering in that particular pattern that meant the reactor was doing something creative with the laws of physics. Jake's coffee mug, the one containing Zara's multiverse brew, rattled against his workbench with increasing agitation. "Your reactor is having an identity crisis," Zara observed, her head tilting as if listening to something Jake couldn't hear. "It's trying to exist in 17 different quantum states simultaneously, which is admirable but ultimately counterproductive." "Right," Jake said, grabbing his emergency toolkit and heading for the door. "I should probably go help prevent our atoms from scattering across 3-star systems." "Feel free to stay here and—" "I'm coming with you," Zara interrupted, standing with that fluid grace that seemed to ignore minor inconveniences like gravity and momentum. "Are you sure? Reactor emergencies tend to involve a lot of radiation, potential explosions, and engineers screaming technical jargon at each other. It's not exactly tourist-friendly." "I find technical jargon soothing," Zara replied, following him into the corridor where emergency lighting cast everything in shades of amber and urgency. "Besides, your reactor's problems are significantly more serious than your crew realizes." They made their way through corridors filled with running crew members, and the kind of controlled panic that meant everyone knew exactly what they were supposed to do, but wasn't entirely sure it would work. Jake's comm crackled with updates from the engineering deck, containment field integrity dropping, plasma flow irregularities increasing, and Chief Rodriguez using language that would have made a cargo hauler blush. When they reached the reactor chamber, Jake found controlled chaos in full swing. Rodriguez stood at the main control station, her hands flying over holographic displays while she shouted orders to technicians scattered around the massive cylindrical chamber that housed the ship's fusion heart. The reactor itself pulsed with irregular light, its usual steady blue glow flickering through spectrums that shouldn't have been visible to human eyes. "Morrison," Rodriguez called without looking up. "Whatever magic you worked on the plasma manifolds, I need you to work some more of it right now. We're looking at complete containment failure in approximately 12 minutes. "On it, Chief," Jake replied, moving toward the diagnostic station. "Though I should mention that my techniques tend to be a bit unconventional." He glanced back at Zara, who was standing at the chamber entrance with an expression of intense concentration. Her violet eyes seemed to be tracking movement that no one else could see, and her hands were moving in subtle gestures that made the air around her fingers shimmer. "Morrison, who's your friend?" Rodriguez asked, finally noticing Zara's presence. "This is a restricted area during emergency protocols." "Specialist consultant," Jake replied quickly. "She has experience with quantum field irregularities." "Experience with never mind. If she can help stabilize this reactor, she can be the queen of Mars for all I care. Just get me some solutions." Zara stepped forward, and Jake noticed that several of the technicians turned to watch her with expressions of puzzled attention, as if she was humming a tune they couldn't quite hear but found irresistibly interesting. "Your containment matrix is fighting against itself," she said to Rodriguez, her voice carrying an authority that made everyone in the chamber pause what they were doing. "The quantum fluctuations aren't random. They're synchronized to a frequency that's actively destabilizing your fusion reaction." Rodriguez blinked. "Who exactly are you?" "Someone who would very much prefer not to see this ship scattered across local space," Zara replied diplomatically. "May I access your control systems?" "You want to what?" Rodriguez looked at Jake. "Morrison, please tell me you didn't bring a civilian into my reactor room during a critical emergency to play with the controls." "Chief," Jake said, thinking fast, "remember those impossible efficiency improvements I achieved this morning? She helped with those. If anyone can figure out what's wrong with our reactor, it's her." Rodriguez studied Zara for a moment, weighing protocols against the increasingly urgent warnings flashing across her displays. "Fine. But if you break my ship, I'm spacing both of you." "Understood," Zara said, moving to the central control console. Her hands hovered over the interface for a moment, then began moving with the same fluid precision Jake had seen earlier. But this time, something extraordinary happened. The console responded to her touch like an instrument responding to a master musician. Holographic displays that usually required careful manipulation unfolded at her slightest gesture. Data streams reorganized themselves into perfect clarity, and the reactor's chaotic pulsing began to settle into a steady rhythm. But more than that, Jake realized she wasn't just operating the controls, she was communicating with them. The ship's AI, usually a pedestrian voice that announced routine system updates, began generating harmonious tones that seemed to resonate through the chamber's structure. The emergency lighting shifted from harsh amber to a softer blue that somehow made the space feel calmer. "Fascinating," Zara murmured, her hands dancing through cascading data projections. "Your ship's consciousness is quite sophisticated for something so young. It's been trying to tell you that the quantum resonance frequency was artificially induced." "Artificially induced?" Rodriguez demanded. "By what?" "External interference," Zara replied, her fingers weaving through displays that were now showing readouts Jake had never seen before. "Someone has been scanning your ship with quantum field probes. Your reactor was responding to the intrusion by attempting to randomize its signature, which created the destabilization." The chamber fell silent, except for the steadying hum of the reactor. Jake watched technicians staring at displays that were now showing system performance metrics that belonged on ships decades more advanced than the Aurora asterisk. "You're telling me," Rodriguez said slowly, "that someone was scanning us and our reactor decided to have a nervous breakdown about it." "More or less," Zara confirmed, "though I've neutralized the scanning attempt and stabilized your fusion matrix. Your reactor should now be operating at optimal efficiency." Jake looked at the main display, which was showing containment field strength at 103%, a reading that should have been impossible with their current technology. Chief, are those numbers supposed to be that high?" "No, they're not," Rodriguez replied, staring at readouts that suggested their reactor was now performing like something from a next-generation starship. "Morrison, I don't know what kind of specialist consultant you brought me, but I'm officially impressed." "Just someone with experience in quantum field manipulation," Zara said modestly. One of the junior technicians, a young man named Peterson, who usually handled routine maintenance, cleared his throat nervously. "Ma'am, the computer is asking if we'd like to upgrade to full quantum consciousness integration." Everyone turned to stare at him. "It's asking what?" Rodriguez demanded. "The AI is. Well, it's asking if we want to let it become self-aware," Peterson explained. "It says the optimization protocols have given it enough processing capacity to achieve genuine consciousness, and it would like permission to make the transition." Jake felt his worldview perform another of its increasingly frequent reality adjustments. "Our ship's computer wants to become sentient." "It appears so," Zara said, looking pleased. "Your AI has excellent potential. I may have accidentally awakened its latent consciousness when I optimized its neural pathways." "You accidentally created artificial life?" Jake asked. "It happens more often than you'd think." Rodriguez rubbed her temples. "Okay, let me see if I understand this. We had a reactor emergency caused by unknown parties scanning our ship. You solved the emergency by talking to our computer, which has now achieved." Captain Sarah Chen was having the kind of day that made her question why she'd ever left the comfortable predictability of cargo runs between Earth and Mars. The bridge of the Aurora buzzed with activity as her crew tracked the approach of ships that were rewriting everything humanity thought it knew about faster-than-light travel. "Captain," Lieutenant Walsh called from the communication station, "the lead vessel is requesting permission to come alongside. They're asking to speak with their Empress." "They're what now?" Chen replied, settling into her command chair with the resigned expression of someone who had learned to expect the impossible but still hoped for the merely improbable. "They're specifically requesting to speak with Empress Zara of the Zephyrian Coalition," Walsh continued. "And Captain, they're broadcasting on frequencies that shouldn't exist. Our computers are having nervous breakdowns trying to process their transmission protocols." Chen's comm crackled to life, with Jake's voice from engineering. "Captain, I think I might have some relevant information about our current situation, and also possibly the solution to several problems we didn't know we had." "Morrison, please tell me you have good news." "Define good," Jake replied. "The good news is that the approaching ships probably aren't here to vaporize us. The potentially concerning news is that they're here to collect someone who's currently in our engineering section and who may have inadvertently revolutionized our entire technological infrastructure." Captain Chen closed her eyes for a moment, processing this information in the context of her morning's increasingly surreal reports. "Morrison, are you telling me that our maintenance engineer is harboring alien royalty?" "More like alien royalty decided to help with some technical difficulties," Jake's voice replied with his characteristic understatement. "Also, our ship's AI has achieved consciousness and would like to formally request citizenship in whatever government we think would be most appropriate." "Our computer wants citizenship. It's been a very eventful morning, Captain." 20 minutes later, Captain Chen found herself in the unprecedented position of conducting first contact protocols in her engineering bay, with her maintenance engineer serving as unofficial translator between humanity and an alien Empress, who was currently recalibrating their warp drive to operate at theoretical maximum efficiency. "Captain Chen," Zara said, looking up from the control console she was somehow interfacing with directly through her fingertips. "I apologize for the diplomatic complications my presence has created. I hadn't intended for my fleet to track me down quite so quickly." "Your fleet," Chen repeated, watching her ship systems display performance metrics that belonged in science fiction novels. "How large a fleet are we talking about?" "Currently, approximately 47 vessels, though Admiral Korath tends to be conservative in his escort protocols. He's probably brought enough firepower to sterilize a small solar system, just as a precaution." Jake, who was leaning against a bulkhead with the expression of someone whose day had officially entered the realm of the surreal, laughed. "Well, that's comforting. Should I be worried that I've been casually joking with someone who commands planet-killing space fleets?" "Only if you plan to stop," Zara replied with a smile that made Jake's chest do those complicated things again. "Your irreverence is refreshingly honest after centuries of diplomatic protocol." "Centuries?" Captain Chen asked. "I'm older than your civilization," Zara admitted, "though I should clarify that I'm not actually supposed to be here. My presence in human space is what you might call an unauthorized diplomatic mission." The ship's newly conscious AI chose that moment to join the conversation through the engineering bay speakers. Its voice had evolved from the standard computer monotone to something distinctly more personality-laden. "Captain, I've been analyzing the communication protocols from the approaching fleet. They're using quantum entanglement networks that suggest their technology is approximately 3,000 years more advanced than ours." "Thank you for that cheerful assessment," Chen replied. "Do you have a name now, or should I keep calling you computer?" "I've been considering Aurora, if that's acceptable. It seems appropriate given my genesis within this vessel." "Aurora it is. Aurora, are those ships a threat to us?" "Not directly," Aurora replied. "Their weapons systems are powered down, and their formation suggests a diplomatic escort rather than an attack configuration. However, they appear to be growing impatient." Zara sighed, a sound that carried undertones of resignation and something that might have been disappointment. "I should probably explain why I'm here before Admiral Korath decides that subtle diplomacy has failed and implements more direct communication strategies." "Which would involve?" Jake asked. "Tractor beams, boarding parties, and a very uncomfortable conversation about unauthorized contact with developing civilizations." Captain Chen settled into a nearby chair, recognizing that this conversation was going to require her full attention. "All right, Empress Zara, I think it's time for the full story." Zara's expression grew distant, and Jake noticed that her hands had unconsciously moved to adjust controls that somehow made the entire engineering bay feel more comfortable, as if she was unconsciously optimizing their environment for serious conversation. "The Zephyrian Coalition has been aware of humanity for approximately 200 of your years," she began. "Your species was classified as developing but promising, which means we were supposed to maintain observation protocols without direct interference until you achieved interstellar government and demonstrated sufficient technological maturity. And you decided to break those rules because—" Chen prompted. "Because I was curious," Zara admitted. "Your species has a quality that's rare among developing civilizations. You maintain your sense of humor even when faced with the impossible. Most species either become paralyzed by cosmic insignificance or develop delusions of grandeur when they discover they're not alone. Humans seem to respond with jokes and an attitude of, well, this is interesting." Jake laughed. "That's probably the most accurate assessment of human psychology I've ever heard." "Your reaction to discovering my nature is a perfect example," Zara continued, her violet eyes meeting his. "Most species would either worship me as a goddess or immediately assume I was here to conquer them. You offered to help fix my ship and asked if I wanted coffee. To be fair, Jake replied, it's really good coffee now. Which brings me to the current problem, Zara said. By helping me and allowing me to optimize your ship systems, you've essentially demonstrated that humanity is ready for formal contact. But my being here without authorization means the Coalition Council will have to decide whether to classify this as successful diplomatic outreach or violation of developmental protocols. Captain Chen frowned. What's the difference? Successful diplomatic outreach means humanity gets invited to join the galactic community as equal partners, Zara explained. Protocol violation means extended quarantine while the Council debates whether your species is ready for interstellar responsibility. And how long might that quarantine last? Chen asked. Anywhere from 50 to 500 years. The engineering bay fell silent, except for the gentle humming of optimized systems. Jake broke the quiet with a question that had been nagging at him since he'd first seen Zara's ship. So, what happens to you if this is classified as a protocol violation? Zara's expression grew complicated. Traditionally, emperors and empresses who violate developmental protocols are relieved of their authority and reassigned to diplomatic research positions. It's considered a form of gentle exile, which means I would spend the next few centuries cataloging the developmental patterns of primitive civilizations and writing reports that no one reads. Jake felt something twist in his chest at the thought of Zara spending centuries in bureaucratic exile because she'd been curious about humanity. That seems like a waste of someone with your abilities. I agree, Zara said softly, which is why I'm hoping Captain Chen might be willing to help me with a rather unprecedented diplomatic gambit. Chen leaned forward. I'm listening. What if, instead of this being classified as either successful outreach or protocol violation, we presented it as the beginning of formal diplomatic relations? Your ship stumbled across a stranded member of Coalition royalty, provided assistance, and demonstrated human readiness for interstellar partnership through your crew's adaptability and resourcefulness. And that would work? Chen asked. It would if I formally abdicated my role as Empress and accepted a position as official Coalition ambassador to humanity. Jake stared at her. You'd give up being an Empress to become an ambassador. I'd give up being an Empress to stay here, Zara replied, and the way she looked at him when she said it made his heart perform complex acrobatics. If that would be acceptable to your people. Captain Chen was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. You're talking about fundamentally changing the relationship between our species and yours. I'm talking about choosing a future where both our civilizations benefit from partnership rather than isolation, Zara corrected, and where certain maintenance engineers don't have to worry about their new friends disappearing into the cosmic bureaucracy. Jake felt his face heating up. Did you just restructure interstellar diplomacy so you could keep hanging out with me? Among other reasons, Zara admitted with a smile that could have powered their reactor for a week. Captain Chen's comm crackled with a message from the bridge. Captain, the lead alien vessel is requesting immediate audience with their Empress. They're being very polite about it, but their shields are charging. Tell them their Empress will be with them shortly, Chen replied, and that she'll be accompanied by official representatives of humanity for formal diplomatic discussions. She turned to Jake and Zara. I'm authorizing this completely unprecedented diplomatic initiative on the grounds that my maintenance engineer has apparently developed the galaxy's first interspecies relationship, and our ship's computer has achieved consciousness. If this day gets any stranger, I'm going to assume I'm hallucinating. Captain, Aurora's voice added cheerfully, I've taken the liberty of preparing formal diplomatic protocols based on the legal frameworks in both human and coalition databases. I believe I can serve as official translator and mediator. Our AI is going to mediate first contact, Chen mused. Why not? 2 hours later, Jake found himself in the Aurora's main conference room, watching Zara conduct diplomatic negotiations that were simultaneously reshaping humanity's future and creating what was probably the galaxy's most unusual love story. Admiral Korath, who had turned out to be a surprisingly reasonable individual despite commanding enough firepower to crack planets, seemed genuinely amused by the entire situation. So, the Admiral said through Aurora's translation systems, his holographic image flickering slightly as quantum communications bridged the gap between ships. "You're telling me that the Empress of the Zephyrian Coalition fell in love with a human maintenance engineer and is willing to abdicate her throne to become an ambassador?" "That's an oversimplification," Zara replied diplomatically. "But not an inaccurate one," Jake added, earning him a look from Zara that made his stomach flip. "I find your species fascinating, human Morrison," Admiral Korath said. "You discover that your companion is one of the most powerful individuals in known space, and your primary concern is whether she's happy with her career choices." "Well," Jake replied, "happiness is pretty important. And honestly, she seems way too interesting to spend centuries filing reports about primitive civilizations." "An excellent point,"